Hello and welcome to Staying Ahead of the Curve. I'm Jeff Snyder, Vice President, Senior Consultant with Cammack Retirement Group. Thanks for joining us today. And we've got two great guests. Our first guest is Tim Irvin, a consultant with Cammack Retirement Group. And also joining us is the founder of 401kplans.com, Scott Buffington. Scott, Tim, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
And our focus today is really the smaller 401k plan marketplace. But before we get to that topic, we just had an executive order last week talking about the Department of Labor fiduciary roles and delaying the enactment of that. Scott, I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Sure. I think it was highly anticipated that there would be a delay, possibly an elimination or major tweaks to the rule. So once I think we had our new president, that this was highly anticipated. But I still think there was good being done if the rule does not move forward. I think there's an awareness out there. A lot of the changes have already been implemented with the different broker-dealers that are out there. I think a lot of them have come out and said that they're going to continue implementing those changes that they've made to their system. But the good point is that it's brought awareness of the need for transparency, the awareness out there to do the best interest, make sure you're executing on the best interest of your client. So regardless if it moves forward or not, there's been some good to the noise in the industry.
And Tim, you've got your boots on the ground. You're out there talking to plan sponsors, other 401k and university plan sponsors. I want to get your perspective on what you're hearing about this topic.
Sure. I think that to Scott's point, I think there's a lot of good intentions behind this, and I think the most common question we're getting from plan sponsors is, aren't all the advisors and consultants supposed to be acting in our best interests already? So I think from our perspective, we're going to continue doing what we've already been doing, and I think a lot of what's being put in place is not going to affect our service model. But moving forward, I think it's going to put a spotlight on the industry and ensuring that advisors are, regardless of the delay or not, that they are acting in the best interest of their clients.
So I guess more to come on that one. So really the main reason why we're here today is really talk about this small 401k plan marketplace. And this is really, I wouldn't say the wild, wild west, but it really is an area that needs a lot more focus. And Scott, you and I have known each other for about a decade. You've spent 24 years in this great business of ours, interacting with plan sponsors from all aspects, operations and relationship management and sales. And you decided to create a new company called 401kplans.com. Could you talk about your new company, what you're trying to accomplish with it?
Sure. 401kplans.com is really a mission-driven organization, and our goal is to bring process, efficiency, and transparency to the small plan market. My background being in the business, as you mentioned, for 24 years, historically was on the mid to large market side. I ran the largest advisor-sold sales force in the country, and I got a real clear view into distribution on the small plan side and helping generalist advisors distribute 401k plans, and felt that there's a huge need out in the marketplace to leverage technology and data to make it that much more efficient. And there's an opportunity really to add value to all the parties involved in a retirement plan transaction, and then add value to small business owners as well by creating documentation on a fiduciary process, a fee policy. As you know, they have fiduciary responsibility to understand the current costs that they're paying today in a retirement plan, but they have no way of doing it. So how do we help them actually meet their obligations as a fiduciary and use technology to do that?
So Tim, you're an individual who's, as a consultant, have focused on all aspects of the market, but I want to get your perspective on this smaller market. You're dealing with plan sponsors who a human resource person who may be responsible for not only retirement, but also healthcare, and may have to deal with regular employee issues. Could you share your experience in working in this very interesting market?
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the things you'll note is that as you move up market, and Scott, I think you'll agree, you see an increase in purchasing power. So you may have larger committees, to your point. Instead of having one person who focuses on benefits, you may have 3 people who focus just on the retirement plan. And you have more purchasing power when it comes to working with the different record keepers, whereas down market, you have the same parts of the plan that you need to focus on. You're still reviewing the plan investments. You're still trying to drive down fees. You're still trying to negotiate services with the record keepers, but you don't have the same capabilities and the same purchasing power to do so. So I think a tool like Scott is proposing is going to allow some of the smaller plans to get access to some of the same things we see more upmarket.
So it's that technology, Scott, that kind of levels the playing field, if you will, for these smaller plan sponsors. As you mentioned, the transparency, having, knowing what the weighted average expense ratio is, or the expense ratio of a particular fund, and actually how an advisor or record keeper is being compensated.
That's correct. When you think about the small plan market, and I'll define the small plan market as typically plans that are $10 million and under. There's about $800+ billion in that market, about 800,000 plans, and about 80% of that market is sold through that generalist financial advisor. So someone who would be a specialist at sitting down with a participant and helping them select funds and do financial planning, but may not have the expertise of the due diligence process of a 401k plan that could put risk on the advisor, risk on the broker-dealer, and risk on the plan sponsor. So the goal of this technology is to take a prudent process that is done in the mid to large market that you do with larger plans and bring it down market. But take that 10 to 20 hours of manual work and spreadsheets and comparisons and benchmarking and do it in about 2 minutes in an app type format.
Tim, you do a lot of benchmarking work. You've run RFPs. Can you paint a picture of some of the things that you're looking for, whether it's cybersecurity, when you're evaluating vendors, just kind of dovetailing into what Scott's talking about in terms of the labor involved?
Sure. I mean, regardless of plan size, I think what we find is that it's a labor-intensive process. From cybersecurity, which is becoming a much more popular topic, obviously people are trying to breach other participants' information. You want to have an understanding of the fees and investments involved, of course, but I think one of the things we're driving towards when we're doing RFPs and we're working with our different clients is best fit. So record keepers can all provide different investments and varying benefits to participants, but what at the end of the day is actually going to help drive participant outcomes? And how do we actually move the needle and get participants engaged and get them to a point where they're putting away more money? So it sounds to me like for your product, some of the information that can be laborsome, having to reach out to 5, 6, 7 record keepers and ask him what the cost is and ask what the investments are. From there, we can narrow down all that information in a more simplified manner and then start to focus on value and start to focus on best fit.
That's right. It creates efficiency of a very administrative process and certainly allows a specialized advisor or consultant to use technology to try to streamline their expertise and be able to afford to offer their services to a smaller plan that really needs their help.
So I think what's really interesting about this story, and having known you for quite some time, is understanding how this kind of evolved.
Sure.
You talked about your experience, and we had on one of our last episodes an investment banker who focuses on technology. And I wonder if you could just share at a very high level how you took this idea. Sure. I think so for those entrepreneurs out there might be very interested, how you took this idea and kind of sprinkled seeds and grew it.
Sure. When I was running sales at my previous organization, I had the pleasure of working with 60 smaller market sales reps, and really some of the best salespeople and professionals out there, hardest working people you'll see. And what they would do is they would do 80 to 100 meetings a month, knocking on doors of financial advisors with the objective of getting 20 proposals. 10 of them might not really go anywhere in order to get 3 to 4 wins. Now, out of those 80 to 100 meetings that they're doing, most of those financial advisors they're meeting with may never write a plan again. So there's significant cost to that type of distribution, and that cost is in a pricing model, which adds to the overall cost that you're offering to as part of a required revenue to a plan. And what I would see is how inefficient that was from a distribution standpoint, how things like benchmarking and fee checks and all the hard work that would go into the distribution process that really wasn't adding much value. So what I'm trying to do is leverage the expertise of the providers, of investment managers, of TPAs, the broker-dealers out there, and try to have an interconnected community using technology and data to leverage relationships to expedite those transactions to try to reduce that acquisition cost of an opportunity.
Tim, technology, can you talk about what you're seeing in the market with regards to advice engines, managed accounts, and other technological innovations, and how they're being evaluated in terms of your process?
Sure. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the experience easier for the end user. We want to make this easier for participants because as the industry moves along, we've started to understand how to get participants to accumulate. We have auto enrollment and auto escalation, and we're trying to spread the message of how much you're going to actually need for retirement, and that message seems to be hitting home. And so from there, we had to instruct participants or help them learn how to invest. So we've seen the evolution of target date accounts and managed accounts. So the participant who doesn't want to look at their account and rebalance it on their own and pick their individual investments has target dates, for example, as a solution to have someone do it for them. Now I think what we're seeing is increased technology and increased thought towards now how do we instruct participants on how to withdraw money. So we're working towards the deaccumulation of the retirement account balance. Do we annuitize? I think really the technology that we see is on a level of engaging participants and helping every vendor do more for the participant to put them in a place where they can actually be successful at retirement.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the only problem you have in the small plan space too is a lot of the providers have outstanding tools to help plan health and outcomes. But the problem you face in the small market is they're not working with sophisticated payroll providers. They're not providing the data in the small plan space to the providers to use those tools. So a lot of the benefits and the bells and whistles that might help another size plan that has that payroll integration is just not available in the small place. So it really shows the need of having a financial advisor or somebody that can actually help that participant because there's not as many tools available.
And I think we've learned, at least from behavioral finance, that it's a multi-channel approach.
Right.
I mean, it's the tools, but you may have people who want to read or they want to view something on their phone or listen to a podcast, and you really need the dynamic service provider to be able to provide all these tools in a way that's functionally effective.
That's right.
That's a great point too. I think, Jeff, there's no specific set of tools that's going to reach every group of participants. So you may have a group that is more white collar and they're on their computers and you can engage them with a good app or with a webinar or with an online tool, whereas there are going to be other groups of participants that are not going to be reachable via the computer. And as a result, the record keeper and the plan sponsors and the advisors need to recognize that, and they need to develop a program where maybe there are on-site visits. I think every plan is different and the participants need to be engaged on a case-by-case basis to figure out what's going to work best.
Yeah.
Last question, Scott. We talked offline in the green room about the auto IRA programs, providing coverage to individuals who may not be covered by a retirement plan. And you've got different flavors. You've got what's going on in Oregon and Connecticut and Illinois and Maryland where they pass legislation. You've got multiple employer plans. You've got solo 401ks. You've got IRAs. If you could just give your perspective reconciling all these ideas and concepts together.
Sure, and you see there's a lot of publicity out there about MEPs, open MEPs and association plans and PEOs and it's really creating buying power for that small employer, so they get the benefits of scale if it's a state plan or whatever it may be. And I think there's a lot of interest. There's momentum there. What you lose is just the control, as a small employer. But there's certainly a market out there for that. There's some small business owners that would like to participate and kind of be more hands-off. They don't want the fiduciary responsibility and would like to offset that by joining a larger entity, if it's an MEP, a PEO, or a state plan, if you will. So there's certainly a market and there's some momentum there. I think there's some legislation that has to go through to allow more open MEPs, which could be a benefit certainly to small employers.
We're certainly seeing that today. As of this filming, there's actually a resolution passed in the House kind of backing out some of the labor rules that we got in the Obama administration around these state-run systems. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and clearly it's a marketplace. The small plan market is a marketplace that's evolving, changing, and needs some assistance. So congratulations to you on the launch of your organization, and Tim, best of luck to you and your consulting endeavors as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the show, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.